This is something that I so want for more OTs, even if they don't want to go into their own business. And this is a little side piece of mentoring that I really, really, truly love, which is helping. And you and I do this differently, helping OTs find their path. And so for me, it tends to be therapists in the more traditional field, or like particular, especially in neuro. But it's like this whole idea that we get out of university and we get our full-time job and we do that for the next, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And then we're totally, absolutely, if that works for you. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Mm.
There are lots of ways to do OT. And even if it's OT and something else that you like, or pulling together a few jobs, or sometimes I get people that come and want to talk and they're like, I know I should take this OT job because it's got great income, great benefits, yada, yada. And I was like, what about the other one? And they're like, but that's what I really want to do. And I'm like, there's your yes. Like, okay, let's figure out how to make that yes. And you helped me with that in the beginning, because one of the barriers was, I thought, was healthcare. I didn't think I had access to healthcare. And I remember you saying, oh, that's figure outable. And I was like, that's figure outable, which is one of my favorite phrases now.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Nink. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. It is an absolute honor to introduce my guest, Jessica Miller, to you. She is a neuro-based occupational therapist and brain injury specialist. And she's also one of the most gentle, intuitive, badass women that I know. She's a kinesthetic being, a deep listener, a super feeler, a mentor, and a natural educator. And she is enlivened by hearing what people know they need in order to bring more joy and meaning into their lives, and by helping them gain the skills and courage to move in that direction. Be it her neuro clients, her OT mentees, her students, or members of any community she's in. I first met Jessica in January of 2022. And at that point, she had been an OT for nearly 20 years, about the same length of time as me, and was perpetually moving in and out of burnout, working in traditional neuro rehab settings, and she was experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance. No, it was deeper than that. There was more of a values conflict. She was committed to providing high-quality, caring, and evidence-based neuro rehab, yet she found herself working in systems that constrained her ability to do so effectively. You know the drill. Stringent productivity standards, billing complexities, and resource scarcity. These things often conflicted with her professional values and approach to patient care. So Jessica joined my group coaching program and mastermind community, Activate Vitality, at that point, and is now flourishing as a whole human in her business, in her life. Her business is called Pathways Neuro Rehab and Education, and it's one part mobile outpatient clinic treating adults with neuro challenges in her Indianapolis, Indiana community. And Pathways is also home to New to Neuro, which is supporting therapists in building their neuro skills while learning to nurture and sustain their own health along the way. She's expanding her offerings to the OT community with New to Neuro's OT Collective in February of this year. It's 2024 if you're listening later. Jessica and I talk a lot about what we need to nourish our own nervous systems as clinicians who are trying to find our way in this fast-paced world. So I hope you love this conversation as much as I did. And make sure you listen to part 2. This is only part 1. It was a long, juicy conversation, a little bit too long for one podcast sitting. So part 2 is going to be loaded up right after it. I'm really excited to have you on today, Jessica. I've been looking forward to this interview for a long time, and here we are.
Yes. I'm so excited. It's so easy for me to talk about my program and what got me here, or my business and what got me here. And the way that your program and my business are so interwoven, it excites me.
But yeah, totally. I feel the same. It's a funny thing too, right? With therapy work, we have to be really clear about boundaries. and with coaching work, because you and I are engaged in a coaching relationship. But we have layers of the way we interact together, both in that you are a participant in my coaching program, Activate Vitality. And so I provide that support. But you're also a contributor in my program. So there's that, what we have sort of like coach and I don't even know what you call a coachee. I wouldn't call it a coachee. And we also have that colleague relationship where we're working together to serve the same population. And that sort of those dual relationships they're usually frowned upon when we're doing our clinical work. And I love that we don't worry so much about that in this kind of work together.
I feel like it's just like one more testament to breaking out of norms.
Yeah.
And we talk, and that the cool part is, yes, could it get confusing or sticky? Yes. But we
Yes.
talk about it, what those
We do.
expectations are, or we talk about which hat we're wearing right now. And
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Sometimes it's like, okay, friend hat on. And do tell me if this is too much information or if this isn't appropriate or you'd rather not discuss this. And then, okay, coworker hat on. Yeah,
And for the record, I don't think there's ever been, we always ask, like, if you want to talk about this, and there's never not been I want to talk about that thing.
that's true. That's true. Talked about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yep. So, can you tell us a little bit about where you are currently in your work? And then we can maybe get into the journey after that. Who are
Yeah.
you today?
I love that question, the way that you worded that. Today, I am, well, I was going to say off work, but I'm not off work because this is now part of my work, but I'm off of my traditional work,
Mhm.
which is I do some PRN OT on the side,
Mhm.
but that's actually a new development. And so the work I'm actually doing with you today is part of my business, which just turned its first birthday or first anniversary this month, which is really exciting. And the overarching business is Pathways. And Pathways has kind of two limbs to it. One is I have a small mobile outpatient clinic where I see a few adults with neuro issues in my community. And then the other part is really what I'm building, and that is continuing education and mentoring for OTs who want to learn more about neuro and just get more comfortable. And I'm really excited and growing that. And so today, on that year mark, I'm really looking at the next phase for that part of mentoring education. And I've already sent a Voxer to you today. I'm back to the nervous part of like, oh, this feels new and uncomfortable and vulnerable.
Mhm.
Here we go. So that's where I'm
Yes.
at today.
So that part that we're talking about is called new to neuro, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
under the Pathways umbrella, but
Yes.
generally known. This is the where people see you online, on Facebook, on Instagram, they see you as new to neuro, that's the product that you talk about to other OTs.
Yes. And so that there's kind of two pieces to that new to neuro. So that could be a new grad or it could be a therapist that's newish to neuro, but it's also just a new way of doing education around neuro.
Don't you love it when you come up, because you came up with new to neuro very early on in your journey, and I love how it can kind of evolve to show that these are your values. There's a lot of your values in there, but how it shows up. My business is called Balance Works Occupational Therapy Consulting Limited. That does not fit on a lot of things, varies. Balance Works OT. But I love that it keeps making sense as like I've had it, I named it in 2007, but it keeps making sense because it's showing up in the way I work in so many ways where balance is important. I work with mental health, I work with adults. I don't call it work-life balance, but sort of everything in moderation, finding our way, finding our equilibrium in even in my coaching work, it makes sense. But most people know me as in the online world as my offer Activate Vitality because I don't really market Balance Works OT so much. So I love that it just keeps making sense.
Similarly, you helped me figure out, well, that's the great thing when you're a business owner, you're trying to figure out your name or your product name. And I don't know how many calls, just either one-on-one or in a group session. And it's like where you're throwing around your values or throwing around what you want it to look like. And people are on the group members are on the thesaurus for you. You're like, what about collaborate or Pathways has that. So I'll give you the long version. You just did it. Bouncers Pathways, Neuro Rehabilitation and Education LLC, right? It's like I can hardly say it all myself. Part of that was because if I'm sending a doctor's referral, they need to know what I do, neuro
Yeah.
rehabilitation. But then you helped me understand, like I had an identity crisis. I'm like, am I Pathways? Am I new to neuro? People know me as new to neuro. And that's when you help me understand that's the product, or that's the kind of the smaller brand that people know you. And so it was really helpful to have that guidance of this big umbrella. And then it's okay as get clear about what you're doing to like niche down and then
Mhm.
name that also.
Mhm. Yeah. And that can change over time. Like it doesn't
Yes, that can
nothing.
change, right? And that's when I feel that relaxing in my body. I'm like, oh, right. It's okay if it changes.
Yes. Because that was something you said a few minutes ago that, I'm in this spot of revisiting, like, it almost like you didn't say starting over again, but you said I'm back to some did you say market research? I know I'm mixing up our conversations now, but that sense of that's iterating, right? Like, it's that sense of, okay, you set out and you created something that has a lot of flexibility you should do a lot of things with, and you're just at another phase of exploration, and that all of the work you've done to get here has informed, and you learn so much when you're in action that you can't learn when you're sitting outside figuring out what all you're gonna do.
Amen to that. So it's interesting as I'm phasing out of that mobile outpatient clinic a little bit. We'll see. Maybe it'll ebb and flow, but I'm not actively looking for more patients. And I think part of that I could have seen in the beginning when you and I were actually talking kind of way back in the discovery call, the clarity call, was you were asking me, what do I want to do?
Mhm.
And I had maybe listed like 5 or 6 things. I just thought I'm an OT. I'm supposed to go into patient care. It's at the end of a pandemic. I should probably like figure out virtual care. And so that's where Pathways came of treating patients. And then you asked me after I'd named maybe 5 things that I thought I wanted to do or should do. And then you're like, what else? What else? It's like, what else? And I knew immediately, but I was like, I can't say that thing. I was like, well, I mean, maybe I could. I'd love to mentor, but I don't even think that's a real thing.
Mhm.
And now a year later, that's what I'm like drilling into more and more and like really excited about creating a community. So it's not just like this top down approach of educating somebody,
Mhm.
but like that OTPs have this, it's more than now, like this wisdom when we come together. And I want to create a community of coming together and learning from each other. And so it's really that mentoring education. But if you hadn't asked me that question of what else or what more, I don't know if I had gotten there.
Hmm. That's interesting. That's really interesting. Because we've had a few conversations about questions that prompted thinking, and I generally don't remember them. Like, I don't remember asking that was an important question, and so I think that so often happens in OT too with our
Mhm.
OT, like our clients, that I often will ask my OT clients, what was the most impactful thing? And it's generally something that seemed very incidental and like on the side. That was the most impactful thing for them. And so I think that's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to remind ourselves to trust our ability to improvise, trust our ability to be in tune with people if we're present and engaged and curious and open. The right questions can't but come out.
And I remember when I was feeling nervous about market research
Mhm.
or anything that felt businessy, but in the Activate Vitality group, people would just kind of reframe it as it's just OTs doing we're doing our assessment. We're doing our needs assessment. And so
Mhm.
that's what you were doing with me. It was like helping us. And it comes so naturally. We're applying it to different population, like different people.
Mhm. When when I've had conversations with our local regulatory body who really appreciate like that they're doing so many cool things to try and help us as a profession grow and evolve. And then at the same time, their responsibility, the way it's described here, I don't know if it's different there, is their responsibility is to protect the public. Their responsibility isn't to the therapist. There are other
Mm.
organizations for that. And so ultimately, being able to protect the public means that there are standards and regulations and things that we have to adhere to. And at the same time, recognizing that things are changing, the landscape's changing. And so, where I draw the line between when I'm coaching and when I'm doing OT, one of the questions they ask me is, am I using OT skills? And like, I almost can't think of a time ever
Of
in my day
course.
when I'm not using OT skills. And so, it's a hard
Yes,
one. Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah, sometimes when you've talked about that before, it's just like an automatic, of course you're being an OT, but then trying to like put their lens on
Yeah.
more
Yeah, and
structured
I
lens.
appreciate where those questions
Mhm.
come from and their perspective and sort of like for me it all comes down to communication and intention. So if I keep talking to them and keep sharing where I'm coming from and keep trying to clarify what I'm doing and why and how I'm trying to fit it into where the regulations and rules are helps build a trusting relationship. And
Yes.
I want to support the profession in growing and evolving rather than make it a positional sort of thing.
Mhm.
And ultimately, sort of thinking about what we were talking about too, about our different levels of the way you and I relate to each other is it just comes down to communication, like open communication, clarification, why, how, is this okay? But that's really important.
That's one of the reasons I love the conversation. I can't remember the details of it now, but that led to us working together as far as like kind of that colleague role of me offering something in your program
Mhm.
came from, I don't even remember what something challenging that happened, what the thing was, but I remember, oh, I do know. It was in a group and multiple people had like a similar business idea, that sort of like conversation. And so that was something I just wanted to talk with you about. The old me would have just been like, this is uncomfortable and I'm just gonna kind of walk away from that. But I knew that you would be I trusted that you are like open and you want to understand my perspective and that you care. And so I just asked if we could chat, and then we talked about that hard thing, and then it was just so freeing, and then I don't even know how that evolved into like, "Hey, maybe we could work together." We had both that's it, we had both been thinking that. I was like, "I would love to offer this thing for a group, but gosh, she wouldn't she's doing her own thing, she doesn't need my help to do that." And then you were kind of had a similar idea, like, maybe she'd like to do this, but no, she's doing her own thing, and then we had a beautiful collaboration, but it came out of being able to talk together about
Mm.
challenging things.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So there's like that there was that established safety to talk about a difficult thing was important foundation for the conversation to happen. But interestingly, what happened was that that discussion was around that there's sort of a part in Activate Vitality where people can become overwhelmed because I encourage them to stop using some of their avoidance techniques through using ACT. There's sort of this the early part of the program is observation, curious observation, getting more present and aware, and then recognizing where we tend to turn away from difficult feelings and thoughts and just like distract, avoid, not do, keep ourselves too busy, like all of the things we do when things feel uncomfortable.
Clean,
Yep. Clean. Yep. So totally.
scroll.
Yep. Take another course. Do all
Yeah.
the, yeah. Yeah.
Get another certification. Yes.
Volunteer for another thing. And at that point, I kind of encourage people to go, okay, well, that's not working. So can you be present with difficult thoughts and feelings when that urge to avoid that experience comes up? Can you be with it? And for some people, that takes away the safety net a little bit. That can be really dysregulating. And I had observed that for a while and know that within ACT, like we kind of teach something that's like dropping the anchor, sort of learning to ground yourself in the present moment with the experience. But sometimes that's hard when I'm not actually in the experience with people, that they're sort of learning at their own pace, sitting with their own feelings in their own time, or avoiding people often stop at that module too and take a break. Because that was hard. And then, but we had some group members who were actively on group calls going, "This is hard. Like, what if I don't want to? Like, this is like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm having panic. I'm, having all of these things." And something that you're so good at and you would do on calls in these group coaching sessions as a participant is you'd kind of check in with them and provide a little bit of grounding on the call and or even just ask questions that help them be aware of where do you feel that in your body or what's that experience like that were so magical and important that I was like, "Oh, it would be cool." Like knowing a little bit more about how you do that for your own practice. I was like, that would be really cool to offer the OTs in the program. And then you had been wanting to do more of that. What are your thoughts on that? And then I'd love to hear a little bit more to tell people what it is that you do inside the program.
I remember there was a call with one of the group members. I can't remember the topic, but she was just struggling with something, probably making or like around making a decision. And she was like asking it was one of those like, what should I do kind of question.
Yeah.
And it was funny that you asked me if I would talk to her. I don't know. You asked me and I was so wanting to speak up, but I didn't want to like take charge in a group. We're all very egalitarian like that. But when you invited me, I was like, thank you. Cause I have like 6 questions that I really, really want to ask her because I just trusted that she knew the answer. It was in her body. I knew it. You could hear it, but she couldn't see it yet. And so just being able to ask her how she feels. Oh, this is where we started talking about our yeses and nos. Like when you try on this answer, what does your body do? And it was like, she was like, my stomach contracts or like, my chest gets a little bit tight. And I was like, okay, well, what about when you do this one? And you're like, I just took an in breath or whatever the thing is. And it's like, okay, so we know your yes, right? Your body just told you. And then she's like, yeah, but, and then it was also scary, right? It's like all of these things. And it's because that meant saying no to an offer. Like she had been someone, I think it was maybe like a job offer. And so she was going to have to disappoint someone or feel like she was disappointing someone. And that's another piece of what we talk about so much. You have that weekly prompt that's like, what is something you said no to this week that
Mhm.
makes room for your true yes? And I love the prompt that it's there every week so I can reflect back. But so for that case, like one piece of it is being able to trust our bodies, that our bodies know. But you were just talking about sometimes we don't, many of us grew up learning not to trust our bodies and our feelings are scary and overwhelming and we don't feel safe. And so in the ACT module where you're asking us to feel our feelings,
Mhm.
well, if we literally don't have the tools to and it doesn't feel safe, how can we create more safety and grounding and know that we're okay? Our body is here for us and the feelings will come and go, but we are safe so that we can tap into that wisdom of our yeses and our nos. And then when it's really scary, when our yes or no is, we've got the support of each other to say that. And it's so powerful that we can help each other stay accountable to our yeses and our nos. I could talk about this forever.
Totally. And I think why I love it so much is you were able to like when I first created Activate Vitality, I really wanted to stay true to ACT tools. And it was also part of my fear of going out and doing something wrong, right? When we go out and do something brave, we're like,
Yep,
well, I better lean on a modality or something that's evidence based because just me out there is open to criticism for doing it wrong.
yep, yep. And that's actually something you're kind of reflecting back to me in my own business right now. I was doing some education, some live lesson, continuing education, and I came back to the group. It's really vulnerable, but I knew something just wasn't quite lining up. Even though the live lessons are like, I think the education is sound, it's evidence based, it's like applicable, which is really important. It's accessible in time, like of commitment and the cost. It's good income. But I was like, it's not lining up. And when the group was asking me why, and I was like, because I'm looking at 20 blank screens. Maybe there's a person or two on there, and it's like me talking at them, and we aren't doing this in collaboration. That's because I was leaning on the old way of education. Even though I'm trying to break out from it, when I was like wanting to do this new thing, I just went back to the old way and I was like, everyone's comfortable with a PowerPoint presentation. Here we go. And so I just hear that reflected back at you when we try something new and
Mhm.
we want to lean on tried and true, but we're actually trying to move the needle forward and do it differently. But that's part of the growth, right?
Totally. Especially too, because we're also doing that dance with participants who know a certain way and that's comfortable for them. So sometimes meeting them a little bit on kind of medium ground or somewhere in between helps it to be familiar enough for them to then build that relationship to bridge to something that's new and provides variety.
That's so true because if I think back to when I signed up for Activate Vitality, what I wanted was one-on-one coaching. What I
Mhm.
thought I wanted was one-on-one coaching. And then the modules felt safe. I was like, okay, I know I'm going to get something of value. Feel like I can see it and I can go at my own pace. And as an introvert, I could do that on my own. And it was the group calls that I was like, dude, I don't really know if I want that. Like, okay, we're going to give this a go because I really like the other two really lined up. And fast forward a year later, it was like, oh, the modules were lovely. But it's the community, like, it was completely reversed, but you're just saying, like, you just made it accessible for people where group calls are just like, "Oh, I don't know about this," but that was the magic, and you help us get there by the other parts.
Right. And honestly, when I created Activate Vitality, I couldn't have foreseen what the community would be because it was blank screens in my mind at that point, right? That
Mhm.
I never envisioned the the magic of the these beautiful people that all showed up and created a community, because I didn't create a community. Like, certainly I do things to set a tone. I do things to, by being me, the people who are somewhat like me in one way or another show up, and therefore they're somewhat like each other. But that the community members make community. And I couldn't have planned for that. Like, how does one set out to create this soft place for beautiful people, like these gentle souls, to land and have safety and support each other, where it doesn't need to be me running everything. It's so often on a group coaching call, like I don't even call it like, it doesn't seem like coaching. It's a
Uh-huh.
community call.
Yeah.
Everybody's just supporting each other. And sometimes I just sit there and have goosebumps and smile while you guys do your thing.
And whenever I feel like I'm getting stuck, it probably means that I'm trying to do it the old way, like a formal education way. And then you show up so authentically. And even, whether it's like, oh, I made a mistake on social media, my marketing, and you're just like, this is how you handle it. This is how you just like, you're genuine and like, I made a mistake. And then it like lets other people make mistakes, right? Like when you show up authentically, it enables other people to show up authentically. And I just keep learning that lesson over and over and over. And it's so vulnerable. How do you show up authentically in your business? Because you just said it attracts people that not necessarily are just like us, but that kind of resonate or want to learn in a similar way or have similar goals that they're working towards. And so you remind me the benefit, the reason why to show up like myself, like yourself every single time. And it's like, oh, it's so vulnerable. But yes, that's the work. Okay, let's go back and do it. And then what if no one wants that? It's like, just trust. Like, that's what you're here to do. Just be yourself and do the thing you do well and just keep going.
Mhm. There's so much ease in what you're saying because, okay, so if I am stretching to be something I'm not in
Mhm.
order to attract a crowd, they're going to continue to expect this thing that I'm not. And that's going to continue to be effortful. Whereas if
Yes.
I can just be me, then just being me is what they want. And that's the easiest thing, except for once you get started, to recognize that just me is enough. And then
Yep.
when you can kind of go, oh, every time, like I learned this through experience, every time I show up just as me, that really works for people. So I suppose the conclusion is just me is something people want. And that's the hard part. But
Mm.
then once you do it, it's just, oh, so like that eliminates a whole bunch of preparation and problem solving and like all of the things. It's like, okay, well, what are the opportunities to just show up authentically? How do I
Uh-huh.
create more opportunities to safely be me? I'm not saying have meltdowns on social media or anything like that, but it almost seems too simple to be right.
It's simple, but it's not easy to do emotionally. It's vulnerable to do it. But as I was listening to you again, I was like, oh, you did it again. You just convinced me again. Because as I'm listening, like, yes, and that's how we like one of my values is like sustainability, meaning that whatever my work is sustainable to me as a human being and sustainable to me and like showing up in the rest of my life, because that's what got me here in the first place was what I was doing wasn't sustainable to my energy and my mental and physical health. And so it's like, right. And I can feel that relax in my belly when we are being ourselves. And then that when we're being ourselves, we can do that all day long. And that actually gives us energy that like is like feeding. And so that was part of the reflecting that you have us do in the planner is after we've done something, it's like, where did we get energy? Where do we lose energy? And not that work takes energy, period. But some of our work, when we can show up like ourselves and have these like enriching, for me, I learned, maybe it's helpful to give an example. I thought I needed to get all the way out of patient care
Hmm.
because of burnout. But when I was reflecting in the planner and I realized it's actually when I am one on one with a patient and we are like engaged in juicy conversation, like their goals and what's meaningful and their strategies to help them. I feel like I can do that all day, every day. But it was the all the other stressors of multitasking and document all the other stressors that we know about that made it draining. But you helped us like help me pull out. Okay, it's when I can really connect with other human beings and like what's meaningful to them and what's meaningful to me that I can have those conversations all day. And that's why mentoring or collaborating and working with other OTs, like, but hearing what they need and like just having that conversation about where they are in their career or in their day and helping them step into themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that all day, every day.
That's really cool. So that sense of when you're in your authentic self in an established relationship, like with a client, whether it be a
Mhm.
mentee or a patient, that part in being able to engage authentically is energizing more so than depleting that part.
Yes.
The hard part is like probably more the marketing side of things on in so many levels too of how do I show up? Like, is it okay enough to show up in that authenticity to attract people? Because it's not going to be right for some people. And that's kind of the point actually, right? Like that the wrong people don't come and
Yes.
the right
Yes.
people see that beacon of you and go, "Oh, that's what I need." And off they move toward you. But that sense of, "Oh, but shouldn't I be?" This isn't exactly what you said, I'm extrapolating. But that sense of making that bridge from here to get to that place where you can be in these engagements with the people you're supporting authentically, that you have to actually be authentic up front in a vulnerable way out more publicly.
Yes. And that when you're doing that, and then there are some people that you get more no's, or if you get less business up front, it feels like, oh, it can feel personal, like someone doesn't like me. But in order to serve them, you would have to keep doing this thing that takes a lot of energy from you. And like serving in a way that is hard and not exactly in alignment.
Mm. Oh, right. You just introduced a really important part there of that. When we have a role, like when we have a mask on, when we're being something else, it's not rejection if it's not somebody else's cup of tea. But when we show up
Oh,
vulnerably in our authentic self, and that's not for some people, that is personal. It's vulnerable. It's hard.
it is.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking when you mentioned social media marketing, I had such a block around email marketing because it doesn't feel like that. I don't get feedback. I'm not like working directly with them. It doesn't feel like it never has felt like a conversation to me.
Mm.
And so I didn't really know. I felt like I didn't know how to do email marketing. And so I'm learning and, the advice out there is loud. You're going to, if you search for how to do email marketing, you're going to get a lot of advice on the how to's. And it just felt like I was using a voice that wasn't mine. So of course it felt bad. And then when you and I were talking, it's like, well, if you could just picture one of your clients that you know and you're just emailing her, what would you say about this? I was like, oh, well, it would be like this. And you're like, what about that for your email marketing? I was like, send that to everyone, but that's not, I don't know how that's, you're right. That is like, I don't know how that's going to land. And it's like, well, that's you. And that's what you literally have to offer. And I was like, right. That's really genuine.
Oh man, I need to take my own advice. I don't think I've sent an
Oh,
email out to my list in a month.
I don't either. It's okay. Great.
Transition is too that I've had my emails written by a social media VA. Like she'll write a draft for me, like a starting place, so that I don't have to start it. And then I can go in and go, oh, that doesn't sound like me. This is what I would say. Or go, yeah, that's great, like as it is, or just how do I just change it a little bit? So right now we're transitioning where I'm going to be doing a lot more of that myself. I'm just kind of like, ugh, I'm taking on too many things. I need to like, I don't have to email every week.
No, you don't. It's okay, right?
It's okay. Yeah.
It's okay. And that feels like a bigger theme around looking at productivity and our worth being wrapped up in productivity and all of the shoulds
Yes.
that we think that we're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And this idea that we're failing if we're not doing all the things that I don't know who they are, but
Who are
eh,
they?
I'm not sure. I haven't found them yet, but they're loud. One of the things I think that's like a misnomer is if you like getting out of traditional clinical care and then working for your own business is that like, yes, while it can be more flexible, it doesn't automatically translate to a calmer work-life balance or less work or anything like that. And I think we can totally take that same mentality of my worth is shown by my productivity and apply it to whatever we're doing.
Mm.
And that has been probably the most magical change in the year, the last year, is learning to, I mean, at the top, we can look at this idea and we can agree with this idea that our worth is not wrapped up in our productivity. Like it's
Mhm.
not a number, right? And like we can say that, but what does it really mean to embody that? And that's where we like the community and the culture of Activate Vitality, it's such a common desire to somehow truly unlearn that because OTs are overachievers by nature. Like we had to get super high GPAs to even get in, and like we're super good at mastering everything and getting more certifications. But
Yes.
right, it was funny, and of course, in the beginning, I thought I needed more certificate. And you, part of one of your modules is like, if you think you need more certifications, I was like, damn it, are you reading my mind?
So the
But
productivity,
hang on.
because we tend to be high achievers, we have been rewarded our lifetime for high achievement. Therefore, our value is in our productivity and what we can
Yep.
produce and what we can achieve. And the thought of slowing down actually feels scary because what am I worth if I'm not achieving, producing? And we know we actually want to take breaks. We know we actually want to have a business so that maybe we could go to the park in the afternoon instead of working sometimes or volunteer at our kids' school or go for coffee or go for lunch or like we want that flexibility. But when we go to try and do it
Mm.
and we go, no, no, like I've got this to-do list. My to-do list isn't done. Like I can't have dessert before my meal. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's unsettling.
And it wasn't until I feel like if we take the approach, we can take like a cognitive approach of, okay, take less off my to-do list because I see the value in rest
Mhm.
and we can, and that can be helpful. But it wasn't for me until I learned that in that high productivity state, my nervous system was actually just maintained overstimulation. In an overstimulated like state, it's just on the go drive. It's just go, go, go. It's right. It's what's next. So it makes it incredibly hard to shift down into that rest mode. And now part of this year, I took a course by an awesome OT, Courtney Beyer, and she does a lot of helping you regulate your nervous system and understanding the different states in the vagus nerve. And so actual practices to help switch down, up or down, depending on what you're needing to regulate. And then it's amazing. And so we talk about this in Activate Vitality. It's like where we put rest in or we plug the things in to help bring that balance as opposed to, like you said, keep like having it for dessert.
You don't have to
I don't
earn
think
rest.
you don't, right. We celebrate rest. Like we truly celebrate rest. And one of the ways we get to it when you help us like find our values. It takes a super long process to find our values, but I know there's one group member who wanted to be a better mom. And for her, that meant not being super stressed, like not, yelling at the kids as much and like being able to be present. And so when we like, why are you at 6 o'clock kind of screaming and not being like you're frazzled and you just can't do it anymore. So then we like back up the day and you're like, oh, I like literally tried to plug in these 8 therapy sessions and I had nothing left in the tank. And
Mm.
so really like when we back it up and we're like, okay, well, I'm actually going to try 4
Mhm.
and see what happens. And it's like insanely uncomfortable
Mhm.
to back it down. But then you can come back to the group and like, I was chill at 6 o'clock. Like we played, whatever the thing is. And it's like, okay, that really helped me get to my goal. But it is incredibly uncomfortable to downshift at first.
Yeah, because she needed to disappoint some people. She needed to
Yes.
not have as many appointments available. She needed to say no to a bunch of things she would normally say yes to. And she loved her work. She loved the
Yeah.
family. She loved that. But then also, when at the end of the day, she had nothing left for her because of the pace she was going at. I remember too, and we're talking about her, she would completely come on here and tell you
Totally.
these things
Yes.
herself. Um,
Absolutely.
but I remember when I first gave her the planner, she never actually loved the planner. But one of the first things was, she's like, I tried, Carlin. There's not enough room in these lines to put in my whole day. And I was like, that's a sign.
How
It's like,
true is how many times have we
so
heard that?
a lot of lines. along the lines. And if the stuff doesn't fit in there, that might be the problem. Yeah.
Yes,
You have to
that
go
might be a
through
clue.
that process of like resisting and rejecting and going, no, no. Like she actually came to me, you know how you came to me, you were like, I need one-on-one coaching and maybe some modules. Okay, fine. I'll do this group if that's the only way I can get this. And
Uh-huh.
clearly she wanted time management strategies. That was what she came to.
Oh, I remember those calls when she was yep, yep.
Yeah.
But when I was listening to you just then, I was thinking, "Oh, you just brought it back to worth," because you're talking about she had to say no to things and disappoint people, and, like, that brings it all the way back to how much of do we discuss, like, if our worth isn't in being productive, it's in how we care for people or people pleasing, and as opposed to knowing our own worth and truly caring for ourselves and putting ourselves first. And that's a lesson that so many OTs, we were amazing at being attuned and caring for other people
Mhm.
until that burns us out. And then we have to do it differently. And the only way to do it differently is to turn that care to ourselves. But the
So
world
interesting.
loves it when we're productive.
When you think about her motive was to be a better mom, that was still to be
Right.
caring for others. But the side
Yes.
effect has actually been that she's caring a whole hell of a lot for herself now and enjoying life and doing like fun things. And I kind of have a little bit of FOMO sometimes for some of the
Aw.
things she's doing. I do
OTs do
some of them
cool
with
things.
her,
Yeah.
but
When my daughter, that made me think when my daughter just recently, so I had just picked up some PRN work and you helped me kind of work through that. Cause I felt like that was, I felt like for a minute, I felt like that might feel like a failure to my business, but don't feel like that anymore at all. It actually served me personally, professionally. It's awesome. But even my daughter, when she learned I was like going back into the hospital, she was like, oh no. She's like, Mommy, I thought, what about your business? And I was like, no, it's still totally happening. And she was like, she said, I'm afraid if you go back to that kind of work, you won't be happy. You're so happy now. And I want you to be. And so from her, like her watching me over the year, I was like, oh, I'm happier to you. Like, I know I am. But when your daughter sees that, that was really cool.
oh, yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That's beautiful. And I mean, how old's your daughter now? 12?
13. Yep.
13. Yeah. And so that modeling that you're doing in
Yep.
your actions, not just what you're telling her, that making a hard choice to find that she sees the difference in you, then she sees if you're valuing yourself, she's going to be allowed to value herself when she's a mom, she's an adult.
And I'm really excited also that she gets to see a woman in business. Like she gets to hear some of the language and finances. And I actually, she's has an artist's eye. So I just did some marketing material and I had her look at it. And so she will give you have to be careful when you ask your children for feedback, but I like to include her like, in that way.
Oh, that's gorgeous. That is so gorgeous. So something that you were just talking about is a parallel you and I have both done recently too, that both have a ton of passion for the coaching, mentoring, all of the things we're doing for other OTs. That's the thing that we feel like is the thing that removes a bunch of ceilings. It creates opportunity. It's aligned. It's soul aligned. It's what we're meant to be doing. And those things don't just take off. Like a
Yep.
lot of kind of what we're hearing out there in the coaching world is, well, you just do all the things and you're going to be a
Yep.
success. And if you're not, it's a limiting belief or it's a
Yep.
mindset issue or you didn't manifest it or whatever, right? Like
Yep.
here OT's talking about the manifestation part, but there's that sense of, well, it's kind of your fault because you didn't fully believe that your business didn't take off. And I like, it's kind of BS. Sometimes these things sprout in their own time. And that though we still believe in them, we're still passionate about them, where it felt stressful, both of us were experiencing this around the same time, was that sense of, "Oh, okay, what do I need to change in my marketing? What do I need to offer? What do I need to change in my" And while we still do that, it was that unsettled because of necessity, financial necessity, because
Yep.
the thing hadn't taken off fully. We're helping people, we're doing things, it's earning an income, like no
Yes.
problem. But there's still a gap of stability that was missing. And around the same time, you and I both went, okay, can I seek stability in other ways so that this doesn't feel so stressful, so that I can
Yes.
continue to feel creative in building this thing, so that I can continue to be authentic. If I can take down the stress by half by actually earning some income in other ways, that actually supports the growth of this thing. It's not a step back, it's not a failure. It's a way of what else can I do to support this so that can continue to feel good.
Totally. And I feel like if we hadn't been flexible in that way
Yeah.
to find additional income and had just stuck with work harder, send more email, do more, like we're getting back into that, like this kind of mentality. I know you can't see me on the podcast. It's like that.
Yeah.
It's that like really driven, nothing wrong with being driven, not at all. If that works for you, but that mentality of like buckling down, being more productive. If this isn't working, like working harder, harder, harder. And I really wanted to, I love the idea of like I don't mean it to sound Pollyanna when I say organic growth, but like try something and then to see, is there life in this?
Mm.
Okay, yes. Okay, but we have to shift a little bit and okay, let's shift and try that as opposed to like, I need an X number of dollars. So I have to make this work in it. Just keep driving without that ability to stop, reflect, try something new. That takes time and creativity and
Mhm.
like wanting to allow for that process. The other cool thing is you and I have both started picking up other clients or doing more traditional OT work. And we're both like, I actually really like this. I
Yeah.
like almost forgetting I really do like this
Oh,
work.
totally. Because without that being the burden of everything and all of the multitasking and big caseloads, that
Yeah,
it was never the client work, like you said
that's
earlier
right.
in the interview too,
Totally.
right? Like it was always all the things all together. And so when we have this kind of sense of, okay, some of my job is doing podcast interviews. And then then I have a couple of clients, OT clients, right? Like that's clients that I'm supporting as an OT. And that can be more magical again when in balance with, oh, look at the balance again. When in balance with
Look
doing
at you.
other things, right? If I don't feel
Uh-huh.
because I feel like so the work that I've picked up is more of my private practice OT work. That's always been available to me. I just shrunk back that side of things to build this. And I've laid a nice foundation for Activate Vitality. It's doing really well, but it
Mhm.
has gaps where it's ebb and flow as
Right.
business, right? And that created a lot of stress for me last year when there was a fairly big gap. So I'm like, okay, I can say yes to the work that's sitting there. Not a big deal. You're doing PRN similarly, like that's available to you, and
Yes.
in proportion, it's more fun and enjoyable, and then just creates that sense of hey, like both are kind of fun because oh, right, that's what I was gonna say. In kind of shifting from feeling overwhelmed with my OT business, the things I didn't love were the multitasking, the paperwork, all the coordinating, all the report writing, and truly shifting toward a more entrepreneurial role. I traded report writing for marketing. And
Yep.
like marketing's a bit of a beast. Like I don't love it. And
Yes.
like it's draining. It's that sense of trying to come up with more new things. And certainly there are ways to streamline and repurpose and all the things. And but still, it's the beast, right? There's work. There's things in any type of working that are still gonna feel like work because that's the nature
Work.
of work.
Yes.
But finding that right thing. So then that also comes, and you and I have talked about this in yours and mine, that wow, there's more kind of like hat switching. Like, okay, now I'm
Yep.
doing this type of
Yes.
thing. Now I'm doing that type of thing. And that can be exhausting as well. But for me, I know the benefits outweigh the costs. How about you?
Yeah. Me too. I think when I was doing full-time clinical work in, with productivity standards that just that aren't sustainable and the documentation, all of that. And it just wore me down and then switched to, like you were saying, some of the work in when you like owning your own business is hard and isn't feeding, but um, there are so many things about my own business that do feed me and energize me. And then there's also things about clinical work that energizes me. Like I get back to the patient care and then I get to work with other therapists and learn from them. And so I'm energized in like multiple spots. And I think it really does depend on your personality. If you thrive in stability and familiarity, then this might not be for you. I love being like stimulated in different ways. And the piece that I love is freedom and choice. So I get to choose if I want to pick up more PRN work or if I want to work more in my business. if I need more income, or I'm okay just pulling back on my own expenses and like not eating out for a little while because I really want to take some time and be creative in my business, like that freedom is golden to me. Or if
You
like
break a
I'm
toe
feeling
and the world
I
decides for you?
thank you. Yep, broke toe last week. And then what do? You were like, oh yeah, so you'll just like not work at the hospital and take some time to work in your business. I'm like, Carlin, you make that sound so easy. Like you're from Canada where you have the different like the demands in healthcare aren't. You're like, of course you have a broken toe. You can't go to work. And I was like, well, here that's called an occurrence. And if you get so many, they let you go. And you're like, what do you mean? It's a broken toe or COVID or the flu. And I'm like, here those are just seen as like numbers. They're called occurrences. And when you get too many, they just like, it's not, they don't see the humanness that humans break toes or get the flu.
Yeah.
But you were also so right. I'm like, yep, I had to call my supervisor and be like, I broke my toe. And fortunately, new supervisor has been amazing, like understanding, supportive. But yeah, I'm working on my business this week.
You are. And you creative things. And
Yeah.
you got to just flip over to something that doesn't require you to have as much
Weight
stability on your
bearing.
feet.
This is something that I so want for more OTs, even if it's like they don't want to go into their own business. And this is a little side piece of mentoring that I really, really, truly love, which is helping. And you and I do this differently, like helping OTs find their path. And so for me, it tends to be therapists in the more traditional field, or like particularly, especially in neuro. But it's like this whole idea that we get out of university and we get our full-time job and we do that for the next, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And then we're totally, absolutely, if that works for you. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Mm.
There are lots of ways to do OT. And even if it's OT and something else that you like, or pulling together a few jobs, or sometimes I get people that come and want to talk and they're like, I know I should take this OT job because it's got great income, great benefits, yada, yada. And I was like, what about the other one? And they're like, but that's what I really want to do. And I'm like, there's your yes. Like, okay, let's figure out how to make that yes. And you helped me with that in the beginning because one of the barriers was, I thought was healthcare. I didn't think I had access to healthcare. And I remember you saying, oh, that's figure outable. And I was like, that's figure outable, which is one of my favorite phrases now.
But Canadian and your free healthcare? What do you mean? How is that even possible here in the United States?
Yeah, that's what I thought. But you're so right. Like I'm on the marketplace and insurance has been figure outable.
So you pay for insurance.
I pay for insurance and I pay according to my income. So when my income's low, I pay less. Yes.
That's cool. That's really cool. Because I do hear from a lot of OTs who stay in jobs that don't fit because of insurance.
I did for a super long time.
I keep thinking of threads we dropped along the way, and that's okay because I love these kind of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite ready to be done with this conversation yet? Great, because it's not done. Part 2 is ready and waiting for you. But before you go listen to that, make sure you reach out to us if we are speaking your language. If you're a neuro OT looking for neuro mentorship, collaboration, and resources to support you and your patients, you will want to get on the waiting list for New to Neuro's OT Collective at newtoneuro.com/the-collective-is-coming. I'll put that in the show notes. Or if you're a too busy OT business owner and like to find more harmony in the way you live and work, I would love to talk to you. Book a chat with me and we can help you activate vitality, just like Jessica has. There's a link in the show notes for that as well. See you in part 2.